Okay, we're into part 2 of the book Feeling is the Secret by Neville Goddard, published in 1944. How many of you were born back then? Everybody. I'm just a youngster, I guess. I was born in 1954, so he wrote 10 years ahead of me. But I find that fascinating because throughout my entire life, this type of thinking has been pretty available, and yet it is not fully embraced by mainstream Christianity by any means. But what is interesting about it is people like Neville Goddard drew their teachings from the teachings of Jesus. That's primarily where they got them. You'll find everything he talks about someplace in a saying attributed to Jesus. And what happened, what I believe happened, is we have two messages in the Gospels, basically in the New Testament. One is what I call the mystical thread, which is the God-centered within you kind of message. The kingdom of God is not coming through observation. You won't say, lo, here it is, or lo, there. The kingdom of God is within you. And then there's the mainstream Christian message, which is the kingdom is going to be coming one of these days. Be prepared. Completely different messages. And I have done a lot of study on this and have concluded that we do have indeed two messages coming through our scriptures, both Old Testament and New. And concerning the gospel story, we have the gospel accounts, we have actual teachings of Jesus that were adopted by the writers, but turned into their particular narrative. And so what we have in teachings like the second coming and teachings like the kingdom is going to come one day, that is the narrative of the writers. It's the people that put the Bible together, we'll just say the Gospels together. There were three things that they went by. You know, we all wonder how did they decide which Gospels got put in the Bible and which got rejected? And you probably know there were many Gospels out there, 40-some Gospels floating around, and the people that put them together, which is called canonization, they were canonized, settled on 4 of them. And the criteria that they looked at was, first was authorship, the second was age, and the third was orthodoxy. And all of these are very interesting. The authorship, the way they decided whether a writing was authentic or not, how connected was it, how close was it to the man Jesus or to one of his disciples or to some of his disciples. And they made their determination in terms of authenticity of authorship based on that criteria. Well, the interesting thing about it is nobody knows who wrote the 4 Gospels. The earliest versions that we have of them have no names. The names were put on later by people looking at, reading the context and so forth and drawing conclusions who probably wrote this. As far as the age goes, that's the most likely because scholars today go back to the earliest versions of whatever they're studying to find out what the most accurate rendition of the early versions are. The last one is the most interesting, orthodoxy. The people that made the decisions said, how close do these writings fit the narrative? And we say, well, there wouldn't be a narrative if there wasn't Gospels. Well, there was a narrative because the whole Christian movement sprang out of oral tradition. It was passed on by word of mouth for many, many years. Paul's letters were the first written documents in our New Testament, they started appearing around 52 or 53 AD. The Gospel of Mark was the first gospel written around 70 AD, 40 years after the death of Jesus. So what was going on between the time Jesus was crucified and the time the first writings appeared, that's what scholars refer to as oral tradition, the narrative. The narrative was being developed. And so by the time they start getting written material, they start comparing it to what has been said. What is the narrative? We compare these to the narrative. And you look at the Gnostic Gospels, for example, which is a whole other set of Gospels, writings about Jesus, writings attributed to Jesus. They do not fit the narrative. They don't fit the narrative that was in place when these decisions were being made, so they didn't make the cut. And anything that did not make the cut was vilified, demonized. Heretics wrote it. This is all lies. Don't believe it. Well, today, hopefully, we have an open enough mind where we can look at these documents that are still around and we can decide for ourselves. And we find there's truth in them. There's some pretty strange things in them. But the same is true with the Gospels. But what we ask, though, is compare what we're talking about in a book like this one we're looking at, the positive relationship between conscious mind and subconscious mind, all of which Jesus taught. Where does that go in mainstream Christianity? And it doesn't go with the narrative. It's there, but the narrative is all about separation. You're separate from God. God is up there someplace. You're down here. You have to accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior to get up there. That's the basic narrative. Well, what does positive thinking and watching your thoughts and your understanding your subconsciousness and all that have to do with salvation? It doesn't really fit in, so it's not focused on. Now, more people are doing it all the time. There are several mainstream ministers through the years. I think Robert Schuller was one of the ones that stood out in the earlier days, I should say, who took a very positive approach. Norman Vincent Peale. I was not a co-author, but one of the authors of a book where he was he wrote the foreword to the book. And it's he was a very positive person. Took the Christian message and said, watch your thinking kind of thing. So there was a tie-in there. But it's kind of the exception to the rule. It's not your everyday thing. Because if you turn on the television and watch, which I don't do, but tune into YouTube and look at some of the things which I do frequently just to see if they're still doing it, and they are, what the message is. And it'll be very rare to find someone who focuses on a message like we're dealing with here. It's always about, do the right thing or else, you're going to end up roasting marshmallows for eternity in a place you're not going to really want to be. But that's what I'm going to do another series or start another series after this one focused on that idea as to how we got on the track that we have with what we call mainstream Christianity. Why couldn't mainstream Christianity be the understanding that we create our own world, that we are not condemned to hell if we don't do the right things, but that, as Jesus said in the parable of the prodigal son, our Creator is always there as a support, always there to hold us up. All we have to do is turn toward that, turn our thinking toward that. And that's what the New Thought movement has encouraged us to do. It's take our minds away from this fear of death and punishment and live. Somebody said unity, and this is true of all New Thought teachings, is not a philosophy to die by, but to live by. And I think that's a pretty good definition. It's like, what's going on here? How are we living here? And I think of the mainstream message as a road. It's got a place where we are now, but it has a destination. And what is that destination? It's heaven. It's salvation. It's up there someplace. We don't know where it is exactly. Hubble has not yet located it. But it is a road with a destination. And I think the mystical thread, the actual teachings of Jesus, are more like taking a handful of precious gems and scattering them on that path. It's more about the journey. It's more about discovering truth on the journey, this life that we live. It's not about trying to be good so you can get your membership in the gated community up in the sky. It's like we are here to live. And so we look for these gems of wisdom and what I call the mystical thread, throughout. And people like Neville Goddard understood this. And he has quite a bit to say about the Bible. If you've tuned into him on through YouTube or read some of his books, he's got a lot of very interesting things to say about the Bible and how to look at it. Another question I raised with Diane a couple of weeks ago was a person like Bob Dylan. We talk about consciousness and how it affects our life. Well, Bob Dylan is kind of known for writing fairly depressing songs. Although I've always liked him, he kind of addresses a level of us that understands suffering, understands hardship and all. Somebody gave the definition of a folk singer. It's a person who gets rich singing about how bad things are, and that's kind of what Bob Dylan has done. But after having that conversation, I ran across an interview from Ed Bradley with Bob Dylan, and this is what he said. This goes exactly with what we're talking about here. Ed Bradley said, "How did you know you were going to be successful?" Bob Dylan had said that he always felt that. He said, "It's a feeling you have that you know something about yourself that nobody else does. The picture you have in your mind of what you are about will come true." Exactly what we're talking about. It's kind of a thing you have to keep to your own self because it's a fragile feeling, and you put it out there and somebody will kill it. It's best to keep it all inside, keep that all inside. That's the key to his success. It's not about what he's singing about, it's about how he sees himself. It's about the vision he has held of himself, and he's a tremendously successful person. He can't sing all that well, but he's a poet, and he can put his poetry into songs that stay with you. I really admire that in him, and there's a couple of his albums I have listened to over and over again, and just really, really appreciate him as an artist. But that explains the key to his success. He's producing this product. He's singing about what he feels is important or what people want to hear, what might help them. Maybe it does help when somebody's feeling down, if they know somebody else is feeling down, and that can kind of help maybe lift you up in some way. Or, like I'm not the only one that's feeling this kind of thing. I don't know that particular psychology, but what he says here, I think, is the key to his success. He has a vision. The picture you have in your mind of what you are about will come true. So he has lived with a conviction of that and certainly played it out. Okay, so Neville talks about, and most of what I'm going to do is quote him directly. I've got one other quote from another person that you might know. "By control of feeling is not meant restraint or suppression of your feeling, but rather the disciplining of self to imagine and entertain only such feelings as contribute to your happiness." You get the drift of that. In other words, we're not suppressing any feelings. We're saying, if my feelings are not going along with the vision that I would like to see manifest, I change my feelings. When you write fiction, or you read books about writing fiction, one of the things they all drill into your head is you want to get the readers feeling. You want to get them feeling. You want to appeal to them emotionally. If you don't, they'll go to sleep, they won't turn the next page, and they'll pick up another book that gets their feeling. The feeling is important, and of course when you write fiction, the idea is to create conflict and disaster and all the things that sell movies and all of that. We're talking about something a little bit different here, but feeling is very important. It's not what you think all day long, it's what you feel all day long. That's really what's important. How many of you have tried to think positive, and yet you can sense there's a knot in your stomach, or there is a feeling of something is not right with my life, and I don't know what it is, but there's just this backdrop of feeling of negativities. You may be thinking very positive, but your feeling is not there. So we want to bring that up. We want to bring feeling up. And we want to be aware of what's going on. When we talk about thinking positive, we want to be sure that we're including those two things, thought and feeling. And particularly feeling, because it is so easy. Your thoughts are pretty apparent. You can just kind of look at your mind, do a mental inventory, and it's pretty easy to define what you're thinking. But you may have to go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist to figure out what you're feeling, because we suppress a lot. We carry a lot at the subconscious level. And I talk about that as the self-image. That self-image is it's a very important thing. It is how we see ourselves. It's not what you say about yourself, but how you actually see yourself that influences the way the creative process works through you. So that's a very important idea. He says, every feeling makes a subconscious impression, and unless it is counteracted by a more powerful feeling of an opposite nature, it must be expressed. The dominant of two feelings is the one expressed. I am healthy is a stronger feeling than I will be healthy. To feel I will be is to confess I am not. I am is stronger than I am not. But you can see in the background, barely, you've got some people playing tug of war. We don't want to get into a fear of that. Like you've got to counteract. If you're having negative feelings, you've got to counteract. It's not like that. It's like we're going a negative flow. We're sending out a negative flow of feelings. We just want to change that flow. We don't want to kill it. We don't want to resist not evil. That's the principle. Don't resist it, because when you resist it, you're saying this is a power that I have to work against. And what did we start out by saying in this service? There's only one presence, one power. We can make our negative feelings a second power, and we can fight against that and create an ongoing problem. So I kind of addressed this, and I was amazed that I found this. I was doing a search for self-image, and I was listed on the 40 most famous quotes, from about self-image. So I thought, well, that fits what I'm talking about here, so I'm going to use this, what somebody put up there. As long as you hold an improved self-image as a future possibility, you simultaneously hold an image of yourself as inadequate and incomplete. You are, in effect, a house divided. I think that's from The Complete Soul. I'm not sure which book that came out of. I think that's it, though. But that's why I emphasized in that book to stop talking about soul evolution. Your soul is already complete. If you are seeing yourself as evolving, that means you are declaring yourself as incomplete right now. I'm going to evolve into something better than I am today. That's not true. It is absolutely not true. You are all that you will ever be at the spiritual level. You can't be any more spiritual than you are now. None of us can. We can be more aware of it. What evolves is our awareness. But if you're saying to yourself, I am evolving, I am incomplete today, and I'll be more tomorrow than I am today, then you're carrying around a definition of yourself as incomplete. It would be like saying, as I've pointed out before, that this universe is incomplete, that there's something not right about it, not finished about it. Well, it's always moving, it's always expanding and so forth, but it is absolutely perfect right now. It's producing what we are seeing. It's producing this thing we call life. It is in perfect order now. It can't get any better. It's exactly right for where we are, for who we are, for what we are at this moment. And so we take a shift in perception of that kind, beginning with ourselves. Now, what we'll say to ourselves is, well, I have a lot of growing to do because I think negatively. I had a negative thought today. I had 500 negative thoughts today. There's not much hope for me. We look at things like that and we say, I'm messed up. I'm not evolved yet. Maybe next lifetime, or maybe, next year, maybe next life, whatever. Not true. And I think in that book I said it's like the proverbial carrot dangling on the end of the stick. You'll never reach it. You'll never get out there. So if we say, one of these days I'm going to reach that carrot, no matter how hard you try or no matter how fast you run, that carrot is always going to be 3 feet in front of you. You're never going to reach it. That's the self-image that we think will one day be perfected. So what if we stop saying that? And what if we start saying, right now, I am complete. Right now, I am whole. Right now, my mind is working perfectly at this very moment. That is absolutely true. So you had 500 negative thoughts. You're not going to stop the universe from spinning. I guarantee it, because we've all done it. No matter how much we screw up, no matter how far we go, we're the prodigal son going out just as far into the far countries you can possibly imagine. Well, we can turn around and come back any time. That's what we're talking about. That's the reality we're talking about. This universe doesn't change because we have a bad day. Nothing changes about it. The nature of God never changes. It's that changeless reality that underlies all things. But we change our perspective, but we do not ever damage our relationship to the infinite. That's where mainstream Christianity falls short. It says we can. It says we can hurt our relationship with God, and ultimately we will lose if we hurt it enough. Well, that's not true. All the near-death research says over and over and over again, people have moments of where they leave their bodies and they have a near-death experience. Almost to the person, they come back saying, it was the most incredible experience I've ever had. And none of this judgment stuff comes into play. None of it. There are some who have negative experiences, but there's probably pretty good explanations for that. Some of the researchers say if they would have had time to let the experience play out, because many start negative and then they turn into something very positive. If they would have had time to let it play out, they wouldn't label it negative. But by and large, or by far, the majority of experiences are absolutely incredible, have nothing to do with that religious system that we have been raised to believe is true. We have no reason to fear burning an eternity in hell. So Neville says that chance or accident is not responsible for the things that happen to you, nor is predestined fate the author of your fortune or misfortune. Now, there are plenty of people who will try to convince you that you're a victim of circumstance, you're a victim of society, you're a victim of something, and you're welcome to that way of thinking. It's a free country still, I think. It was this morning, but you you can buy into that and say, yes, I'm a victim, and, I have every right to be sad. I have every right to struggle. I have every right to suffer. I had a horrible childhood. And as I asked a couple of weeks ago, okay, you had a horrible childhood. Why are you still having a horrible childhood? You're not a child, are you? Aren't you an adult? You're an adult having a bad memory. And you're reliving that memory, saying, that happened to me, therefore I am carrying this wound, and I will always carry it. You can't change your childhood. Well, you can. You can change your childhood. You can't change your history, but you can change how you're looking at it. You can change how you're experiencing it right now. Because when did your childhood happen? You're thinking about your childhood. When did it happen? If you're thinking about it, it's happening now. That's when your childhood is happening. It's happening now. It's not happening 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, however old you might be. It's happening now. So what are we doing about our childhood? Are we reliving the pain? Are we reliving the suffering that we went through as a child? If we went through suffering as a child? That's the thing I've said about reincarnation, that I don't like the idea of being a teenager again. I don't want to do that. I hope that never happens again. I hope I don't come back and have to do that. But I could look back at my teen years, as probably most of us could, and said, that set a whole trajectory for my life that changed the whole thing. No. The thing that changes the trajectory of your life is the choice you're making at this moment. That's the thing that changes it. So where is that? I don't want to relive my teen years, so why am I doing it? Why am I thinking about it? Or why am I thinking about it in that way? Why am I thinking that had anything to do with the true nature of my soul? The soul in a teen body, it's not your soul's fault. It's just kind of what you got to do when you come here. You go through that age thing. But it's not you. That's just the vehicle you were driving around for those years. It's not, and maybe it was a clunker. Maybe it just didn't work so well, or you had acne or something that you didn't like, and it defined your whole, ruined your whole life. Well, it doesn't have to ruin your whole life. What ruins your life is the choice you're making at this moment. And that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. But, Jesus said, whatever you want, ask for in prayer, believe that you've received it, and you'll have it. Why would he say that if it's not true? That's one of the mystical threads, one of the gems that we want to hang on to. When you're holding on to something in the past that was painful and you think it affects your present day, you are believing that you've received something, only it's negative. It's like you're holding this picture saying, that's what I am. I can't help it. It happened, and it's affected my whole life. But what's affecting our whole life is the choice you're making each moment of your whole life. That's what we have to get a handle on. And it's not necessarily the thought, it's the feeling. What's interesting about the universe, what's interesting about God, is God doesn't say, here's how I want you to think. Here's how you ought to think. Saying, here's a system. You can either cooperate with it or make it work against you. You can do whatever you want. It's up to you. But again, if you mess it up, I still love you, kind of thing. And you'll be okay. But what kind of life do you want to have here? That's the real issue. And so how are we using our mechanism of thought and emotion, the conscious and subconscious levels? That's the big question. The subconscious is not concerned with the truth or falsity of your feeling. It always accepts as true that which you feel to be true. Okay? So that's a pretty interesting statement. It's like it doesn't matter to the subconscious mind what you put in it. It'll churn out exactly what goes in. And basically our life is kind of the balance of that. The quality of our life is kind of the balance of that. And, okay, we're not going to have every thought and every feeling positive from this day forward. But I like what Arnold Palmer said about golf. He said, I think it was Arnold Palmer, don't shoot for the hole-in-one, just shoot for the green. Just shoot for the general area. And that's what we want to think about as we go through our life. It's impossible if you've been in the habit of thinking negatively or having low self-esteem, to suddenly change your thinking, suddenly change the way you feel about yourself. It's a process that we wake up to. But if you begin with this idea that my soul is complete already, that's like whatsoever you ask for in prayer, believe you've received it. Start with the end. Start with the truth that you are already complete. And your mind is surface, and it's going to make mistakes. It's going to make choices that aren't so great. But it does not damage your soul. And that's where the whole idea of sin has been a weight around our necks that we need to get rid of. That we do things that we're going to be punished for. If you have a negative thought or feeling, you're not going to be punished in the future. You're punished the moment you have it. The negative thought and feeling is the punishment. That's it. So can you get rid of that? Can you let that go? And you'll say, well, I don't deserve it because I'm a bad person. No, you're not. You may have done things that hurt other people. You may have done things that aren't the most shining example of humanity, on the planet. But you yourself are a whole and complete soul. If every limitation were suddenly removed from you, you would be the most lovable person on this planet, just by virtue of your nature. But we are living in a self-image that is so cluttered with junk, so cluttered with misperception, that we try to live a happy life in a mud pit of our own thought. And we can't do it. But the way to get out of that mud pit is say, that's not me. That's not where I'm at. We start with that idea. I'm a whole, complete spiritual being right now. I'm not evolving to it. I am that at this moment. And it helps us bring our thought and feeling into alignment with that. Your feelings create the pattern from which your world is fashioned, and a change of feeling is a change of pattern. The subconscious never fails to express that which has been impressed upon it. Okay, he says that over and over and over again. You hear that message all through his speeches and his writings and so on. But to illustrate this, every one of our lives is different. Like this is a magnetic iron filings thing, that creates a pattern. We all are expressing different patterns in our lives. Where do those come from? They come from us. See, that's what we're saying here, is that whose feelings are the feelings you're having? Well, they made me feel bad. Maybe they did trigger something in you, but if you give them the power to make you feel bad, that's saying you don't have power over your feelings. You can't control your feelings. So you might as well hang it up. You'll take a book like this and just put it down, and it's not going to do any good. Until we accept the relationship between this vibration we're setting up through our feelings and through our thoughts, we call it overall through our consciousness, until we accept responsibility for that and say that my pattern that I'm setting up is my own, it's different than yours, we all have our own, that you actually become excited about that. I can create my own world by how I think, by how I feel. For many people, that's a revelation. It's something they've never thought about because they've always been told, well, you were born this or that, in this or that situation, so here's what to expect. Or you've got this or that education, here's how you think. It's not true. None of it's true. We have to forget basically everything we have learned. Who was it that said everything I needed, I learned in kindergarten? Pretty good idea, pretty good philosophy. And maybe even the thing I remember about kindergarten was the naps. I love those. To impress the subconscious with the desirable state, you must assume the feeling that would be yours had you already realized your wish. This is the key. In defining your objective, You must be concerned only with the objective itself. The manner of expression or the difficulties involved are not to be considered by you. I really love that. That's the Jesus thing. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe you've received it. Don't try to figure out how it's going to come. It's a believe you have received it. And he's saying, how would you feel if you had it? That's exactly coming from the teachings of Jesus. How would you feel if you had it already? And that's very much worth taking time to write down. Whatever it is you want to see change in your life, how would you feel if you had it? Start jotting down some of the feelings. That's kind of hard to do, to jot down feelings, to write. But once you get started with it, it's pretty easy. I do it all the time now. It's a very therapeutic practice. How would you feel if you had the thing you desire? How would you feel if you accomplished it? So the point then is that becomes your objective. How close are your feelings throughout the day to that? That's what you've defined as your objective. And so we watch that and we bring our feelings back. It's very easy to get sucked into the current of daily life. Somebody said one of the biggest problems with life is it's so daily. And that is, it is true. Our thoughts are there and they shift all over the universe in just drop of a hat. So we watch all that. But this is the key to everything that Neville is talking about. That whatever you desire, how would you feel if you had it? And to actually generate those feelings. Don't just write them down, generate them. Feel what it would feel like. You'd feel free, you'd feel happy. You'd feel a great relief. You'd feel something very positive. So allow yourself to generate those feelings or let those feelings come. If you dwell on difficulties, barriers, or delay, the subconsciousness, or the subconscious by its very non-selective nature, accepts the feeling of difficulties and obstacles as your request and proceeds to produce them in your outer world. Okay, don't let something like that scare you, because that is a tendency. Everything I think or feel is going to come out. Well, let's not do that. Let's not worry about that, because every time we give that kind of power, just know it's a law. It's a principle. But don't let it scare you. Let it encourage you. If that's true, then, well, all I have to do now is change my feeling and change my thought and move in another direction. The subconscious is the womb of creation. It receives the idea unto itself through the feelings of man. And that was 44, so it's the feelings of people. It never changes the idea received, but always gives it form. Hence, the subconscious outpictures the idea in the image and likeness of the feeling received. To feel a state as hopeless or impossible is to impress the subconscious with the idea of failure. And the exact opposite of that is true. To feel the state of hope as potential for success and happiness and peace and so forth also impresses the subconscious in that way. That's why Jesus talked so much about agriculture, about seeds, the relationship to planting a seed and the product that you get as a result of that. It's a simple but ingenious metaphor, idea to hold. He recognized, as people through all ages have that understand this type of thought, that there's a relationship between what's going on in us and how our world shows up. And that's really the bottom line. Okay, I'm going to spend one more Sunday morning on chapter 1 of Neville's book. So if you haven't read that, read it and reread it, or listen to it. I'll give you the links on the YouTube channel or on the YouTube program. So I'll spend one more time there. Then the Sunday after, I'm going to get into the chapter on sleep, and that's a very interesting one. We'll move to prayer, and then we'll move to the last chapter. But I'll probably do a couple of sections on each of the chapters. But I'm spending 4 on this one because it's the longest. All right. Thank you for coming out. Hope to see you next week.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Bottorff here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.